Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 341. We're jumping back into the FinCen files, folks. We're going to talk more about money laundering, and we're going to talk about the 6 money laundering reforms that need to occur according to the experts. Now, we've talked a lot about money laundering as of late, ever since the FinCen files broke especially. But even before that, I was talking about the ties that bind. And the ties that bind, folks, are the greenbacks, the euros, whatever you want to call it, whatever sort of money that you're talking about, that is what makes this go. And these money launderers, all of these operations that are in business, places like people like Jeffrey Epstein and, the sort of people that he would cavort with, well, they've been manipulating this system for far too long, and they've been taking advantage of people like us for far too long. And not only them, but their bankster homies. The whole entire industry is corrupt. And again, let me reiterate, I don't mean your local bank manager, okay? I'm talking about people like Jess Staley. I'm talking about people like Leon Black, Glenn Dubin, the most elite of the elite in the financial world. At least in their minds, they feel like they're elite. But these are the people that we're talking about when we're discussing the FinCen files. These are the people that have manipulated the system for so long, found so many different loopholes that were put into the system by their friends in Congress that they had never ever thought that they would ever have to be held to account for their many, many financial transgressions. Well, like everything else in 2020, they were wrong. All right, so let's jump into our article from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The headline: 6 money laundering reforms that experts say need to happen right now. Well, we've talked a lot about what I think should happen, so let's see what the experts think. This article was authored by Ben Hallman, Spencer Woodman, Will Fitzgibbon, and Carrie Kehoe. The biggest banks in the world are moving vast amounts of money for drug cartels, corrupt regimes, arms traffickers, and other international criminals after having pledged repeatedly to do more to staunch the flow of dirty money. Let's add human traffickers to that mix as well, because we know for a fact, okay, that Jeffrey Epstein was using LLCs, shell companies, and other standards within a money laundering operation. It is very apparent what was going on. And there are, I would guess, other human traffickers doing the same exact thing. The system-wide failures exposed by the FinCen files, a 16-month investigation by more than 400 journalists, have led to calls for reform from prominent politicians and government bodies. The reporting even prompted the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the U.S. agency known as FinCen tasked with overseeing bank compliance with money laundering laws, to ask for ideas about how to enhance the effectiveness of its operations. Well, I think that's a good sign, right? Look, again, I really don't have faith in any of these regulatory bodies or any of these bureaucrats, to be honest with you. But at least it seems that the FinCen agency, they're open to ideas from other people, from outside sources, and I think that's a good thing, because I am sure there are a lot of people with a lot of good ideas to help combat money laundering. We're not talking about a victimless crime here either, folks. You know, we've established how this affects everybody on a daily basis, how it affects people like you and I on a daily basis. And we've also discussed the transfer of wealth, the obscene transfer of wealth that has occurred during this lockdown period. All of that goes back to these same scumbags that we discuss on a regular basis that are manipulating the financial system every single time they make a transaction, pretty much. So, what's to be done? A more robust enforcement system is within reach, say finance, legal, and offshore experts interviewed by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Here's where to begin. 1. End too big to jail for U.S. banks and bankers. Didn't I talk about, I think I said that last night. Too big to fail is such a joke. It's audacious and gross. The fact that Obama didn't put anybody in prison after that financial meltdown told me everything I needed to know about Barack Obama in that instance. The fact that he had so many scoundrels from the financial world around him, I knew right away nobody was going to be on the hook for what occurred. The only people on the hook were people like you and I who had our 401ks absolutely depleted, destroyed, and crushed. No big deal though, right? Timothy Geithner, he don't have to pay his bills, but we do. The Deferred Prosecution Agreement, or DPA, has become the go-to tool in the U.S. government's efforts to force banks to crack down on criminal payments moving through their accounts. A financial institution in the crosshairs of law enforcement agrees to something like probation. Criminal charges are tabled, and in return, the bank pays a fine and agrees to reforms overseen by a monitor. Again, bullshit. Look, let's be very clear. If you or I make a financial crime, we go to jail, okay? If these people are involved in financial crimes, no big deal. Just some more oversights needed. We'll have a monitor oversee what you do. Meanwhile, what they're not telling you is the monitor is a guy that used to work with them. I mean, obviously that's hyperbole. I don't have direct evidence saying that, but you know how the good old boys network works. You know how nepotism works. And if you think that these rich scoundrels on Wall Street aren't the biggest fans of nepotism, aren't the kings of it, oh boy, you're in for a rude awakening. But critics say overuse and under-enforcement of the DPA has let banks off the hook for egregious violations of money laundering statutes with few long-term consequences. There's been no long-term consequences. Some fines. They had to shell out a few $100 million here and there. But what is that to them? Just a simple drop in the bucket. There has been no real penalties for these people. And I've said it for a very long time, since the first financial meltdown, that these too big to fail institutions are an absolute joke. If they go away, a new business will swoop right in and take their place. That's how capitalism works. That's how the marketplace works. If there's a demand for the service, you better believe someone will be there to fill the demand. And if those people don't want to play by the rules, the cycle will repeat itself. But I want these people in prison. The CEOs for these banks and these financial institutions that get caught involved in financial crimes, oh yeah, I want them in prison. I don't want to hear any of this BS about, monitors and suspended sentences and probate. I don't want any of that shit. I want prison for these people. They've become, in effect, the cost of doing business rather than a real punishment, Jed Rakoff, a senior federal judge in Manhattan, told ICIJ. Definitely, 100%. A cost of doing business. It's like overhead to them now. Over the last decade, at least 18 financial institutions signed DPAs for anti-money laundering or sanctions violations, an analysis by BuzzFeed News found. 4 were fined the second time for violating the law. Twice, the U.S. government responded to the repeat offenses by simply renewing the same agreement that failed the first time. Of course they did, because remember, all of those people that are in Washington, D.C., every single one of them, they were put there by these banksters. They were put there by these bagmen. They were put there by these big investors. And they can't they can't turn around now and put these people in prison or anything, can they? They'd lose all of their money. They'd lose all of their finances. Oh no, the misery. Well, here's my opinion on all of it. Every single race, congressional or state, congressional or Senate, no outside money should pour into a state. Whoever is running for Congress or Senate from whatever state they're in should have to raise that money from within their state. Why should somebody in New York have a say over what happens in Nevada? Why should somebody in Nevada have a say over what happens in Oklahoma? Enough of the outside money. Enough of the dark money. Enough of the dirty money. ICIJ's examination found that 5 global banks, JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, Deutsche Bank, and Bank of New York Mellon, kept profiting from powerful and dangerous players after paying fines as part of DPAs. Well, who was in charge over there at JP Morgan? I think it was Jess Staley, right? How is Jess Staley not fired by now? How is Jess Staley still in his position? Goes to show you that Barclays really does not care. And the rest of these banks, forget it. What do we got? 3 of them that were connected with Epstein in some way? So I am sure as the digging continues and more evidence is unearthed, we're going to find out a lot more about Jeffrey Epstein and money laundering, folks. A lot more. The legacy media hasn't even begun to dig into that yet. They've scratched the surface a little bit, but they have not done any extensive diving like we have here on the podcast. How to convince financial institutions to take money laundering more seriously? Go after culpable leaders, Rakoff said. To my mind, the single greatest objection is that the ultimately responsible executives never get prosecuted at all, he said. I was a criminal defense lawyer for 15 years doing mostly white-collar defense, and the only thing that ever scared my client was prison. And boy, that scared them. Yeah, these rich people don't want to go to jail. They're not built for it. They're built to be the overseer. They're never built to be the worker. They're never built to be put into jail or entombed in a prison. Hell no, that's not their life. That's for me and you if we break the law or if we don't pay our taxes. That's what happens to us, not them. They write those rules. Their buddies make those rules. And then they, in turn, are able to skate out using loopholes for those very rules. 2. Tighten suspicious transaction reporting requirements. Yeah, I'm on the fence about SARS, and as you well know, I can speak on that from personal experience considering I've used the FinCen database before. I think the SAR process is kind of ridiculous, and I think that there needs to be a more stringent way to go about this. Suspicious activity reports that banks are required to file with regulators often lack crucial information, including the most basic facts regarding who is actually behind suspect multi-million-dollar money flows. Well, in my case, at the sportsbook, it was the same situation. Sometimes I'd SAR somebody and I wouldn't even know their name. I just have to give a description of what they were wearing, etc., etc. So it was kind of a waste of time, right? This reflects crippling ignorance on the part of compliance officers who told ICIJ they cannot properly do their jobs without this information. And it also hobbles law enforcement and bank regulators who use these SARs to inform their own investigations. It's true, but how can you compel somebody to give you their name? Like there was a time where I filled out a SAR on somebody and I didn't have any details on them at all except for their physical appearance. And that's what I sent in. So how are regulators going to determine who that is? What are they going to look at video footage from the cameras? Well, how long before that stuff's purged? There has to be other safeguards here. There has to be another way. I don't have the answer, though, what the other way might be. I'll leave that up to the regulators. I don't have enough information and enough knowledge of the whole system in its entirety to have a better way, to be honest with you. But there has to be a more informative way to provide these SARs. Compliance staffers' questions to colleagues in private banking and other client-facing divisions are often ignored, not answered to satisfaction, not answered in a timely manner. Royce Delston, a Washington-based attorney who specializes in anti-money laundering systems, said, "Compliance officers experience a great deal of frustration when it comes to requests for information from within their own organization. I've seen the compliance department get absolutely hammered before. I've seen the way that the compliance departments are overworked. And I've also seen how in these compliance departments, you would think that there'd be a bunch of mathematicians, but there's not. Just some average folks most of the time, at least from my experience. So I think there needs to be better training in the compliance department. And I think that there needs to be actual accountants in that compliance department, and not just one or two, but maybe everybody. It might turn into something where you have to have real professionals looking at this stuff because it's serious. It's serious. All right. If we miss the money laundering, it turns into a lot of misery for the rest of us. Delston says a full solution will likely require massive regulatory changes. The most effective fix? Force banks to keep customer information in a centralized database that compliance staff could access automatically, ending the troubled request for information process. In other words, bankers would no longer be the gatekeepers to information about customers they profit from. See, I'm big on privacy, but I am also big on these people being regulated because they have proven that without regulation, they don't do the right thing. It's like having a kid, right? You tell your kid, look, I'm not going to give you a curfew. You're 17 years old. You're 16 years old. You've always been a good kid. You've done the right thing, so I trust you. And then that kid goes out. He ties one on, gets drunk, passes out in his friend's front yard, and you have to come pick him up. Well, the days of no curfew are now over, sonny boy. And that is the same situation for the financial institutions. I have had enough of giving them enough rope to hang themselves because, folks, they've hung themselves time and time again. When are we going to get serious? When are these people going to have to face repercussions like the rest of us? Empower bank compliance officers. Bank staff tasked with monitoring transactions and raising red flags when necessary are the front line in the global fight against money laundering. 100%. They have to be better trained. They have to be better in tune to catch this kind of stuff. And they have to know what to do when it occurs. But compliance officers told ICIJ that they often felt powerless to compel their own institutions to close accounts that appeared to be connected to criminal activity. Of course, look, you could be the greatest compliance officer in the world. And if you go to say like somebody like Jess Staley and say you have concerns about Epstein's account, but Jess Staley's pulling in a 25% yield off of that account, what do you think he's going to say to you? He's going to tell you to relax. He's going to tell you not to worry about it. He's going to tell you that everything is fine. When in reality, as the compliance officer, you know that's not the case, but you're between a rock and a hard place now. The bigwig of the company is telling you things are okay, but you know differently. What do you do? Former HSBC compliance officer Alexis Grulin said that the suspicious activity reports he spent his days completing did little to stop concerning activity. Why are we filing SARS? Grulin recalls wondering. The account is still open. Nothing is actually being done. And it's the same for us, right? I filed SARS before on players, established players, and I was pretty adamant that something was amiss. But yet, they'd still be there betting, they'd still be there firing away, and they'd still be there depositing their money. Again, if you're not going to trust your frontline workers, if you're not going to trust your compliance officers and those who have been put in those positions to stop this very thing, then what's the point of having that division? Stories like this are not new to Rick McDonald, the executive director of the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, ACAMS. McDonald says that banks must give compliance officers a meaningful voice within their institutions. Specifically, he said there should be clear, unobstructed pathways for compliance officials to elevate concerns over financial crime to officials within the bank with the power to close accounts or take other action. They don't have that power now. A guy like Jess Staley can step right in and overrule them and say, look, we're going to go this way. But then when the shit comes down, Jess Staley points fingers at compliance, points fingers at the way things are set up. Has nothing to do with him or his personal relationship with Epstein, or the fact that he was probably peeling off a cool 25% on the slide. McDonald said that while many banks have made strides to better empower their compliance people, others have not. Government regulators must use their supervisory powers to examine obstacles that keep bank compliance officers' concerns from being acted upon, he said. On a global scale, there is still a long way to go in terms of effective supervision and effective compliance, McDonald said. Well, one thing that the FinCen files certainly put on blast is that, There needs to be oversight. These people who are in charge of compliance need to have the ability to freeze an account. They need to have the ability to go above the heads of the people in the private banking, because those are the real pieces of garbage. Those are the people that are really involved in the scumbaggery. And tax haven USA. U.S. jurisdictions such as Delaware, Wyoming, and South Dakota can be easier to abuse than the Caribbean tax havens of popular imagination. It's true, folks. Look, and I'm ashamed of that, right? I'm definitely ashamed of it. I'm not proud of the fact that it's easy to launder money here in the United States in certain places if you're a rich person. What it shows you is this is a worldwide problem. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States, the UK, or some small island in the middle in the Mediterranean. It's the same story. These scoundrels are abusing all of us the world over. They're keeping us all slaves to their monetary system, and nobody bats an eye about it. Everybody just goes on with their life and continues to be in debt, continues to suffer through predatory lending. And these people who do it, even when they screw up to the most epic degree like they did during the meltdown, nothing happens to them. So I know here in America, for sure, I will definitely be pushing for my elected officials here in my home state of Nevada to be stringent about this. I've already had a few phone conversations with some of the elected officials here in Nevada. I'm pretty active on that front. I always have been very active politically here locally. And I'm really going to push this. I'm really going to push it, and I'm not going to shut up about it, because I think it's important, and I think that all of us are really suffering under the heel of these banksters. And I, for one, am tired of having my life, my dreams, my hopes stolen and crushed every single time something goes south with these people. Some states don't require any information on a company's owner or manager to open a new business. Less paperwork than what is often needed to obtain a library card. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. I am not a huge fan of giant regulation for the most part when it comes to most industry. Of course, regulation must occur, but it has to be the right kind of regulation. In this respect, I want them completely blanketed at this point. The financial system, the financial sector has proven that they are the enemy, basically, of all regular, normal people. You know, the 99% of us. Experts and regulators responded to the FinCen files investigation with calls to end the easy creation of anonymous companies. Entities whose owners are not publicly recorded or shared with federal authorities as a first step. Yes, that would get rid of a lot of the shell companies. Somebody would have to take responsibility for what's going on at that company. And if you put a fall guy in there, well, chances are that person's going to rat on you if they get in trouble, right? And also, it gives the government a way to make sure what is going on at these shell companies. If a regular company like McDonald's has oversight, then one of these companies should as well. Anonymous shell companies make it practically impossible to determine the identity of the perpetrators, said Linda A. Lacewell, superintendent of the New York State Department of Financial Services, in an op-ed responding to the FinCen files investigation and its expose of criminal activity. She definitely did. We talked about that as well. She was pretty forthright about that. How it's all a sham, folks. It is all a sham. And I know I have spoken with people, colleagues of mine, that work in the financial sector, that laugh at the SAR process, that laugh at the oversight that occurs. So these people who think that the banks are our friends or the banks care about our well-being, they're absolutely wrong. The corporations, the banks, none of them care. All right? They don't care about us. All they care about is making sure that you're divided. All they care about is making sure that there is chaos. Bills to require U.S. companies to disclose their owner or owners to FinCen are before both chambers of Congress and have the support of President Donald Trump's administration. Well, I find that shocking, honestly. Donald Trump's administration, just like Barack Obama's administration, is filled with a bunch of people from the financial sector. So I'm honestly very shocked that it would have the support of the administration. The Senate bill would boost penalties for repeat offenders and require certain companies to disclose their true owners, including those with at least a 25% stake or who own a controlling interest. It would not create a public registry of owners, as some advocates and experts had hoped. No, they have to have their loopholes. Remember, folks, anytime you hear the Senate or Congress talk about how they're going to make your life better, run for the hills. And I don't mean to keep banging on this drum, but how long are you folks going to keep sending these incumbents back? Do we really need Nancy Pelosi in Washington, D.C. for 40-something years? Do we need Mitch McConnell there for 20-something years? Do we need Chuck Schumer there for all of those years? Or how about Chuck Grassley or any other of these other octogenarians? It's time to vote them all out, folks. In a few weeks, you have your chance here in America. And I really hope that those of you who are following this Jeffrey Epstein case, those of you who are locked in to what's going on here, do just that. Vote them all out. It's time we send our neighbors to D.C. to do our work. Not professors, not doctors, and certainly not lifelong politicians. The FinCen Files series revealed long-standing problems involving willful violators of our nation's laws, said Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, the Democratic co-sponsor of the bill, in an interview with ICIJ. We're hopeful this new bill, that once it comes into law, and I think it will be a lot harder for them to violate these laws, and that they'll pay a price when they do. Well, like I said when Sherrod Brown first had that interview, words are wind. Let's see it. You've been in D.C. for quite some time, my friend, so let's see what you're really about. Let's go after these bankers. Let's put some of them in jail. Close the United Kingdom's giant secrecy loophole. The UK is a money laundering hotbed. According to one estimate, more than $90 billion in dirty money is laundered each year through the City of London. That's insane. But again, look how long London has been around as the center of the financial universe until Wall Street popped up. So they have entrenched grift going on there. There's no doubt about it. They have ancient ways to steal money in London. It's been going on since William the Conqueror, right? So I don't doubt for a second that there is a ton of dirty money in London. But what I don't doubt either is the people of England have had enough of this shit as well. I know from the people that I speak to here on the podcast alone, there are a lot of people that live over in London who listen to the show, and they're fired up. They've had enough. They feel like we do here in the United States and elsewhere. We're getting jobbed, folks. We're getting the shitty end of the deal every single time we turn around. A central problem has been the rise and misuse of anonymous companies known as LLPs and LPs incorporated through Companies House, the UK Registrar of Businesses, by people with ties to corruption, crime, and even terrorism. How is that even possible? I mean, we have in America and England, we're two of the richest nations the world has ever seen. There is no excuse for this shit to occur. Well, we don't have the money for the proper training to bring in the proper professionals? No, we do. The problem, folks, is that they want these loopholes there. Until our elected officials come together on both sides of the aisle and decide that this shit is over, we will continue having to swim through the refuse of these scumbags on our way to a little bit of happiness. An ICIJ analysis of LLP companies registered in England and Wales revealed an excess of $4.5 billion in funds, compared to the figures reported in a selection of LLP company accounts filed with Companies House, casting doubts over the reliability and accuracy of their accounts data. I highly doubt it's accurate. I mean, I know I'm sounding hella skeptical here, folks, and kind of like a doom and gloomer, and I really don't like to do that. But when it comes to the financial system, it is absolutely FUBAR. And I really don't have the answers, right? I wish I did. It's very frustrating for me too. But what I do know is it all starts with accountability, just like anything else in life. If you have to be accountable for your actions, you're going to do a better job when you're deciding what sort of actions you're going to take. And with no accountability for these scumbags, well, what do you expect? Days before the publication of the FinCen files, Companies House announced a litany of new reforms intended to clamp down on fraud and money laundering, including preventing company directors from being appointed until their identities are verified by Companies House. So again, who's overseeing Companies House though? You see what I mean here? There has to be oversight from the very top. And the only way we can have proper oversight is if we have the proper people elected. And folks, I will speak for America because I can't speak for anywhere else. But I will say this, we have failed in our duty as voters, all of us. Look where we are right now. Look at the division in this country. We can't figure out what's up or what's down. Never mind come together to work on good bills like this. This is what suffers when we're busy being tribalized. And I say it over and over and over again on this podcast. Enough is enough. It is time for us all to come together and turn our attention to where it should be focused. Graham Barrow, an anti-money laundering expert, thinks that a few changes could radically alter the landscape of money laundering in the UK and stop the use of shell companies. First would be to introduce a requirement that at least one officer of any UK entity should be located here in the UK and accept accountability for the filings made by the company. I like that. Accountability. A buck stops here with a guy, right? And you'll have to probably pay that person a shit ton of money to take that job for all that responsibility. But guess what? Find you a nice, honest person. Somebody who takes their job seriously. Somebody who wants to shit on these money launderers. There's plenty of people out there like that. I am sure there are plenty of accountants who are just as mad and fired up about this shit as I am. Two would be to exclude from the register of persons with significant control, i.e. the owners of the company, any entity that does not meet the current requirements. I think that's a good idea. I really think that's a good plan, and there should be somebody to answer for this shit when it goes south. Europe has 27 different approaches to fighting financial crime. It's time for the continent to work together. And look, a lot of that has to do with they want it to be that way. They want it to be fractured. They want there to be some confusion because in confusion, these people thrive. In confusion, the money flows. The European Union's 27 countries have primary responsibility for supervising and enforcing anti-money laundering laws. Persistent weaknesses led the European Commission to mandate stricter dirty money controls. And look, I am certainly not an expert on the European Union, but they have to do a better job, the same as the authorities in the United States have to do a better job. We have to lead the way, folks. The Western world must lead the way here. We have to stand up and we have to say enough is enough. We have to stand up as one and tell these bankers that their days of pillaging the earth, raping us for our futures, and making us live in poverty, it's over. How long are we going to just sit here and let these people continue to have their way with us? Some countries, including Cyprus, Spain, and the Netherlands, have been slow to introduce new rules, including overhauls that would make it easier to identify the owners of companies and trusts. Yeah, here's an idea. Take a look at all of the politicians in those countries and see where their money's tied up. See how many of them have money tied up in the banking sector. and I'm sure a lot of them do. Others, including Latvia and Malta, have long attracted criminals and billions of dollars in dirty money. We know that Jeffrey Epstein loved him some Latvia. We know that he loved him some Latvia. And we know that he had some financial dealings over there. So my question is, what were those dealings? What banks were they with? What banksters were they with? And were those dealings all on the up and up? If not, you know where I'm going with this. All right, let's hear it from the back, everybody. RICO! RICO, RICO, RICO. They should all be caught up under RICO right now. Responding to FinCen files, European politicians called for uniform regulations and for stronger supervision in the form of a new European agency or greater powers for the existing oversight body, the European Banking Authority. I think that's a good idea. You know, if you have a European Banking Authority, they should probably have some wide-ranging powers to make sure everything's on the up and up, right? The European countries decided to join the European Union. That means they have to play by whatever rules are set. So, let's see this new agency. The existing anti-money laundering system simply does not work, said Eero Heinäluoma, a Finnish member of the European Parliament, during a debate on the FinCen files. It's a Swiss cheese full of holes. And that's a perfect way to describe it. That's exactly what it is, folks. A Swiss cheese full of holes. And the only people that get to play and the only people that get to jump through those holes and use those loopholes are the ultra extremely wealthy and the criminalistic amongst them. The only people that have to play by the rules are us. And they keep it that way by having you at each other's throats. I really hope that this election coming up and the ones we have moving forward, that people really start to understand the stakes. People start to understand that this is not a game. This is not a, oh, well, I want my side to win. We need to elect quality people. We need to send quality human beings with a moral compass to Washington, D.C. People that are going there with the understanding that they're going there to speak on the behalf of the people, on their constituents. No money from outside sources coming in for their political runs, and no more hanging out in Washington, D.C. all the time to be corrupted by K Street. Things need to change, folks. My question to you is, are we ready to make those changes? If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And folks, we are 6 days away from the new podcast kicking off. Unsolved but Not Forgotten will kick off on October 30th, and the first case we'll be looking at is the West Mesa Bone Collector. I hope to see you all there. All right, everybody, have a great night.